All right. Welcome to the Cheerful Sound Man podcast, a podcast for production professionals, all about life and work in the production industry. I'm Eric Bunt, the Cheerful Sound Man. I own Vivid Sky Productions in Gainesville and Tallahassee, Florida. I've toured the world, had a lot of fun, worked a lot of shows, and continue to do so with our company here. All right, today's topic, what we're looking at, let's see, is what the consequences and how to deal with problems when problems or mistakes arrive in events. So this is specifically on my mind, and hopefully the employees the stories that I'm referencing, my employees hopefully know by now that when we have problems and issues, we, as a company, as people, our big thing is to get better. So this is not a personal thing or personal attack or anything like that. So I'll leave names out of it, but probably folks within my company probably know the incidents I'll refer to. But really this is, as much as anything, this is actually kind of an internal message to my team as well. And that's one of the biggest things, one of the biggest sources of chaos in the production world is mistakes like leaving equipment off the truck or forgetting an important element. And I wish I could say this didn't happen, but it happens all the time. Not just our company, other companies. We have really done a pretty dang good job over the last 2 years or so of reducing that. So it's actually become a much more rare occurrence here. As we were growing very rapidly, and our inventory system was a little all over the place, sometimes we seem to miss things a lot more. We've gotten to a place, our inventory system's a lot better. Still has some work to do, but we have a lot better handle on where our gear is, where it's coming from. Oh shoot, that's gonna be a problem because it's on another truck. And then we also have a lot better handle on things getting packed better. So a lot of times the issues that come up is somebody from the previous gig, especially in our busy seasons for spring and fall here, somebody from our previous gig didn't put all the cables for this, proprietary cables for this item back into the case. So now I've got a mixer with a proprietary cable and I can't plug it into anything. So now I'm in a panic mode. Now, if you're 5 minutes from your shop, it's probably not a big deal. You send somebody back or you go back, you dig through your stuff, you find it. But for instance, the other day we had the entire pre-rig trunk. So the first thing that was supposed to go into the venue gets beam clamps clamped to the beams, motors hung, the motors, all that stuff was on the truck. But the one trunk with all those rigging bits and bobs that, again, were the very first thing that needed to go into the building, got left behind. And that was a venue that was 2 hours away. Traffic was extra bad because there was an incoming storm and some different things happening and just dynamics in general. It was a Friday afternoon. Tampa traffic's terrible. We're in Gainesville. It's normally an hour and a half, maybe. This was now 3-hour trip. And it was the end of the day on Friday. I had nobody left in the warehouse. Everybody's going home. So basically that one case that got left behind then turned into, it was a snowball effect, and both very costly on both time and money. And these are the things that we want to avoid in general, but also the things that introduce chaos into an event. Now, thankfully, this was a day before load-in. If this was a day of load-in, it would have been much, much worse, much more stressful. But it was a day before load-in, so it was a little more relaxed in that respect. But it was a situation where we had a stagehand call, where we had brought in 3 or 4 stagehands to help our couple of guys build a big LED wall, as well as some speakers. And so now we're missing the first element we need, and it's going to be a good 3-4 hours between, but by the time we get everything from here to there in the building ready to go. So now you have a situation where you have 4 hours almost of burn time for 4 or 5 people. So if you just do the math on that, even, I don't know, $150, $200 an hour for those guys, right there, you're pretty quickly at $500 or $600 just burned, thrown in the trash can of labor time. And then on top of that, once that stuff finally gets there, the hands eventually will run out of call. It's not like they just clock out and hang out and then clock back in. Like they were slotted for an 8-hour day, starting at a certain time, ending at a certain time. So now you have a situation where 3 or 4, the meat of their time is gone. So we've got to, when we do get there, we got to rush, we got to put it together, we got to slam it out. And then thankfully the venue let us work later, but then it's just 2 of our guys doing a job that should have been done by 5 guys once they're cut, and they have to work late into the night. So now they're tired. They should have been done at 8 or 9 o'clock. So now they end up working until 2 o'clock, just 2 of them by themselves. So there's a whole lot more work, a whole lot more stress, a whole lot more exhaustion. And then on top of that, those guys are now into overtime hours. The guys who work for us that are now plugging away. So you have what seems like a pretty simple mistake. One little trunk got left off is now becomes a $1,000 to $1,500, hard expense that, those things really add up. Thankfully, this was a bigger show, so that was able to absorb a little better. But that still was a solid chunk of the profit, which the profit goes into paying for all our overhead and everything else. That's not getting rich money, that's staying in business money. So when you get into these situations where you make mistakes, sometimes there's the financial consequences. So again, that seems like a very small mistake, but small mistakes don't cost $1,500. That's not small, in my opinion, at least not where I'm at in life. That's a big mistake. So a small, simple error of not checking it off as it went on the truck, missing that trunk, ended up being a very big mistake. Additionally, what was the other big one we had in the last week? We had another one that was similarly bad, but we've had these things where things have gotten left off, and we've been as far as South Carolina or someplace, and we were missing one element. And so now you're calling all around, trying to get an emergency last minute delivery from a company that you may or may not know, that is then going to, now if it's your homies, they might do you right. But if I've never met them before, they're going to rightfully so charge me a pretty fat last minute fee to get that thing prepped and to run it across town. We've had, you want to save those emergencies and those last minute things for actual emergencies. Like we had one, actually was in South Carolina, I think, Digico 338, brand new, beautiful console, just absolutely took a dump. So something happened with the computer on it. It just absolutely decided to quit. There was not really a way to do the show without it, even though there's a front of house and a monitor, but this artist had tons of tracks and effects using all the processing power in both consoles. And thankfully we found one that was about an hour and a half away. We called, pulled out the Amex, whatever it costs, get it here and make the show happen. So what I'm getting at is that was a $2,000 to $3,000. That wasn't a mistake, but it was a problem. And so you want to save those emergencies and those times, because those will happen, especially as you get bigger as a production company. You want to save those emergencies and that money for those emergencies, that little budget allocated for mess ups. You want to save that for those times, not the, oh crap, this was preventable, I just left it on the loading dock. And so that's what we've been trying to preach internally. But it's one of those things, I think this will resonate with a lot of people, even at the garage level, at the starting out level, all the way up to the highest levels. We had one today working with another large production company. They're transferring some gear over to us, and it turns out not all their gear was back from another show, and it was just a logistical mistake, right? They had the wrong dates, they crossed their wires on it, and thankfully it's not going to be crazy, but it's gonna, like, that mistake cost probably about $1,000 extra in shipping to ship it from the other facility to here separately. So some of the stuff's now coming from here, some of it's coming from here. On top of that, it opens up the opportunity for additional problems. So if I got 2 shipments now instead of 1, the likelihood or the opportunity for one of them to be late or get lost or get broken is much higher. When I had everything coming from one place, that truck I can track, and I know if that truck's delayed, then the whole thing's delayed, versus this hodgepodge thing. And again, those things happen, mistakes will happen, but our big focus has been how to both deal with those in the best, most graceful way possible, and preferably least expensive and least damaging way possible, but also eliminate those. And again, I'm very grateful we've, for the most part, struck those mistakes out, but we have still had them. Last year, we had a dance marathon event where the motors got left off of a truck. And that was actually a truck that was transferring in from our Tallahassee office. They had everything else. They were in the middle of like a 5 or 6 day run, which tends to be when all these mistakes, they start to creep up on you, is when everybody's going a million miles per hour. But the big thing is, take a deep breath, take your time. Remember, it's better to be 10 minutes late and have everything than to be on time and not have everything, and now you're 3 hours late. Those are also the things that your clients and customers will see, and those are the things that make you exude professionalism of like, hey, these guys are always here with everything. They're not making 6 runs back to their shop. They're not having to run to Home Depot to get extension cords. And again, we've all been there. Sometimes you end up and you get there and the whole site layout's changed and now you need different stuff and whatever. That happens. That's not really what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about preventable mistakes. We've also had things like vehicles, like just not paying attention. Somebody bumps into somebody in a parking lot. Not necessarily the biggest deal. We have insurance for those things, but it does end up, it costs hours of time and lots of money in deductibles. And just it becomes a whole process that becomes an issue for an extended period of time. And again, they're called accidents for a reason, but all the ones we've had, which thankfully have not been many, have been highly preventable just by somebody taking a tiny bit more time, paying a little bit of attention, and double checking things. And same with the cases being left off of shows. It's the same deal. Did you take the extra moment to look through? Our process is, our inventory, you book it out, you scan it and allocate it, which is one process where you're putting serial or barcodes in, but then there's an actual book out, which is supposed to be like a manifest. You're checking it off as it goes on the truck. And sometimes we get in a hurry, we get lazy, we start booking them out like, oh, that whole pile's going on, click, 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 click. But we're not checking the pile thoroughly. And again, just taking that tiny bit of extra time makes a big difference. And sometimes we get complacent in our work. And that's where you can actually avoid those mistakes, avoid costly mistakes and costly problems. And because if you are a person of integrity, you're going to figure out how to get the show on the road, how to get it going, no matter what it costs. And sometimes, as I've experienced, that can be extremely expensive, to bring in those last minute emergencies, much more than the $1,500. I've lost a lot of money on a show before because we had an entire issue with LED wall where we had to bring more in. Again, this was a long time ago. Show was all up and running, but that's one of the small handful of clients that probably would prefer never to work with us again. So you also get, just being brutally honest, you lose money, you lose trust, and you lose what was or could be repeat business, which is the best type of business to have. Repeat business costs you the least. So with that being said, take your time, take a little more time, be thorough, think through all the things you're going to need, draw it all out on paper, think back through it, have a friend or a coworker look at it too, go like, hey, I think I've got everything together here, should have everything we need. Double check this for me. Is there anything I'm missing? Anything else I can think about? So there's lots of ways we can mitigate those mistakes, but the biggest one is just being thorough in our process, slow and steady, and making sure it all gets on the truck the first time.